Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Jun-sok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks ended strongly higher at the end of last week on Wall Street. Anticipation for some vaccines to come out. Here in Korea, the KOSPI now above 2,500 points. What's the story in the global markets today?
Okay, well, as you just stated, the U.S. stock market has a very good week last week. It generally went up, except on Thursday when all three major indices went down, but it recovered more or less on Friday. S&P rose 2.2% for the week. Dow rose 4% for the week. NASDAQ rose 0.6%. For the week. Now, the popular interpretation is that the optimism about the vaccine is outweighing everything else. But then you also have to remember that last week, or 2 weeks ago, when the news of the vaccine came out, it drove the market, NASDAQ especially, somewhat lower because it had a negative effect on the tech stocks. But still, this week or last week, it does seem like people are viewing it more optimistically, and while the tech stock hasn't gone back to being a very high growth stock, it does seem to be recovering fairly nicely. Now, there was also some other news, especially concerning the so-called value stocks versus the growth stocks. AJO Partner is planning to shut down their $10 billion fund because they've specialized in value investment, but value investment hasn't done better than growth stocks, and apparently they are shutting off their operations. This just shows generally over the last 10 years or so that the value stocks hasn't seemed to be doing very well, especially compared to growth stocks, though there's different interpretations on why that may be so. Now, in Europe, FTSE, DAX, CAC, Euro 50, they all had a very good early part of the week, but toward the end of the week, the markets didn't do as well. It either fell or remained stable. Asian markets, it's been showing a very mixed results last week and today. Nikkei had a very rapid rise last week, and today Hong Kong, it had slower growth over last week. Shanghai, it fell last week, but all three indices did seem to rise today. KOSPI, it rose steadily last week and today. It seemed to be doing very well with foreign investors. They've been concentrating on semiconductors. Today, Samsung went up by 4.91% and SK Hynix went up by 9.25%. Apparently, they're very bullish on the possibility of semiconductors next year. They're foreseeing a very high increase in sales, even though if you look back on the beginning of the year, their estimates for what it was going to do this year was very mixed, but next year they seem to be very optimistic, the international investors. Kosdaq, it was flat last week due to the tech stock holds, but still for this week, it seems to be starting out with a fairly good increase.
Well, over the weekend, we saw the signing of RCEP, the free trade deal between 15 countries, including South Korea. Tell us about this deal and what effects we might expect it to have.
Okay, well, it's a mega FTA within the Asian region dealing with 15 countries. It includes the ASEAN 10 countries, plus Korea, China, Japan, and Australia and New Zealand. Originally, India was to be included as well, but last year at the final stages of negotiation, India dropped out. The negotiation started with the ASEAN countries, but soon became China-centric, so a lot of people argued that RCEP was a counterpoint to U.S.-led Trans-Pacific Partnership, but President Trump dropped out of TPP, and the RCEP negotiations actually accelerated because of that, because the Asian region economies, seeing that the U.S. under the Trump administration became more protectionist, they seem to be turning to RCEP to make the global trade more integrated and freer. Now, the RCEP includes about 30% of global GDP, about 30% of population, and as mentioned, its meaning is that it is a mega Asian region. FTA, but for Korea already has FTAs with all the member countries except Japan. And the RCEP is considered a shallow integration. It's not considered in-depth, partially because it has ASEAN developing economies as well as India, who participated in the negotiation. And India wasn't really enthusiastic about opening its economy to Japan, to China. So the effect is probably going to be a bit muted compared to other FTAs. KIEP, the government-run research organization, estimates that it'll increase the GDP by about 0.4 to 0.6%. Now, it does have further decreases in tariffs, which are not included in other Korean-related FTAs with these countries. Notable also is unified rules of origin. So Korea had different rules of origin with each of these countries in their FTAs, but now it'll be unified into one rule of origin, which should make paperwork a lot easier.
Well, now we're almost out of time, Professor. What's on your radar at the start of a new week in the days ahead?
Okay, well, on the Korean side, the most important statistics will not actually be statistics, but it'll be the housing market review. That'll show exactly how the housing prices as well as availability of 전세 housing as well as rental housing and housing sales are going to be doing. And this is expected to kick off another round of policies on housing and real estate. So that's probably going to be the big news, economic news for this week.
All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.